Hi, it's Mark from Top Local. We're here with Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, Vancouver's best auto service experience, and 21-time winners of Best Auto Repair in Vancouver as voted by their customers. And we're talking about diesels this morning. How you doing, Bernie?
Doing well.
So, removing diesel emission equipment. I see actually quite a few diesel vehicles in my area that are blowing excessive smoke. Is this just a malfunction, or has someone removed the emission equipment?
Could be a bit of both. Now, it depends on what age of diesel. Of course, older diesels do tend to smoke. That's a normal part of the way they were. But anything newer, and I'm talking like 2008 and newer, shouldn't be really blowing any smoke whatsoever. So if you see a vehicle, truck, car, anything like that, that's that age and it's blowing smoke, there's either a malfunction or someone's removed emission equipment. And I know where you live, and I know that it's very tempting to remove that stuff, and people do it all the time around here.
So why would someone remove the emission equipment when it was put there for an important reason, keeping our air clean?
Yeah, well, there are quite a few compelling reasons if you don't actually care about the quality of the air that you breathe or about other people's air. But that aside, there are a few compelling reasons are it removes the there's a lot of complication to diesel emission equipment. There are particulate filters, there's a urea injection system to remove particulate. There are catalytic converters that again reduce the emission from the diesel system. Plus, we can talk about the EGR cooler. These are more on the engine side of things, and the EGR system, which creates a whole different level of issues. So, to keep a diesel clean, there's a lot of complexity to it. Not unlike a gasoline engine, but diesel emission equipment is sort of new, and I think it's kind of finding its way through the system, getting the bugs worked out. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is really expensive. When it fails, it costs a lot of money to fix. On the other downside, the fuel economy is not as good on an emission-equipped diesel as it is on a non-emission-equipped diesel. So by simply removing those items, you actually use far less fuel, which is certainly money in your pocket, and you can also get a lot more power out of the vehicle too. So again, there's a number of advantages, but of course the disadvantages is the quality of our air. So
you mentioned that these components, the system, complicated as it is, it's probably expensive. How expensive is it?
Really expensive. Like a particulate filter can be $3,000 or $4,000. A catalytic converter, same amount of money. The urea injection system, there's again, it can be thousands of dollars worth of components and pieces there. So there can be a lot of money of things to go wrong. Generally, these things do last a long time. There's also a number of sensors as well that can malfunction. They're not so expensive, but again, you have a check engine light comes on, or it won't go into regeneration mode. It can be a couple of sensors. You could walk out with $1,000 bill. So, it's tempting to go, well, let's just, spend a couple $1,000, get rid of it all. And, but there's a price to pay, and we'll talk a little more about that.
So an EGR, that's an exhaust gas recirculation. Is that right?
It is.
Okay. So why would you delete that?
Well, there's a number of issues that happen with that. What EGR does is it recirculates exhaust gas back into the combustion chamber of the engine. And what the effect of that is it actually cools the combustion temperature. That reduces NOx emission. And, that's a very high, NOx emissions are very high in a diesel engine. So EGRs have been around for a long time. But what happens with the EGR system, Ford 6 Liter is famous for this. Their EGR coolers would crack and create a whole number of problems. So a number of companies came out with EGR deletes. You basically get rid of the EGR system and problems are solved. There's some other companies, Bulletproof Diesel, for instance, that have come out with basically bulletproof coolers where they solved all the issues that were inherent with the, EGR, original EGR cooler. And that basically, that's a basically good alternative. Once you put one of those in, your problems are basically solved forever. So you can keep the EGR system. But the other disadvantage of the EGR is it just, and we see this a lot on Mercedes diesels, and a number of other smaller truck diesels and car diesels. It just puts a lot of particulate material and carbon deposits in the intake system that can block everything up and need to be removed. So, having that not there would certainly eliminate that problem. But, again, there's a price to pay environmentally. So better to keep it on and keep it working and fix it.
So to remove your diesel equipment or emission equipment from your vehicle, is this illegal or legal to do that? And are the police out there looking for people who've done that?
Okay, so legality in the United States, every state in the United States, it's 100% illegal to remove any emission equipment or tamper with anything. In Canada, it's a little more of a Wild West kind of attitude. The research I've done, federally, when a vehicle's sold, it must meet the Canadian federal emission standards. But once the vehicle's sold, it's really up to each province to regulate that. So certain provinces, Saskatchewan, for instance, at least back a few years ago, it's fully legal to remove any emission equipment from your diesel vehicle. I don't know about gasoline. I assume gasoline's the same thing. It's fully legal to remove any emission equipment and modify it any way you like. I know in Ontario, absolutely 100% illegal, just like the US. British Columbia, same thing, I believe. At least if the police know that you've removed anything, they'll order it to be re-inspected and set back to original specs. So that's kind of how Canada works. You'd have to, if you really want to know, you'd have to check each provincial law. But to be on the safe side, better to keep it all for sure.
How expensive is it to restore them if you get caught?
Well, it costs a lot. And so as I mentioned, a lot of these components cost thousands of dollars. I mean, if you were to remove your emission equipment or you happen to buy a truck that has it removed, make sure you keep everything, or I'm not advocating doing it, but keep every single bit and piece. If you happen to buy a truck that's got the stuff removed, hopefully the seller has everything to give you. Otherwise, I think that makes that truck worth an awful lot less money. I mean, you're looking at thousands of dollars to put everything back to original. And, that would be with the idea of buying, basically the cheaper way would be to buy the what's missing used and then just get it functional and modified. But it's a lot of work to restore it.
Is it only from trucks that people are removing the emission equipment?
Well, mostly, but there are people who remove it from cars, TDI Volkswagens. We even had a client with a BMW diesel station wagon, which is kind of like a surprising customer, I would think, to want to remove emission equipment. But there was a couple things that happened in the vehicle, and then another thing that happened. He said, "I'm just going to take it to Alberta and have this stuff removed." There's a shop that specializes in that. So it's everybody. I hate to say it, but people are cheap and self-centered. I mean, I'm a person too, sometimes, but people they care more about their own self-interest a lot of times than they do thinking about the broader picture. When you think about the air that we breathe, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the air quality in Vancouver was far worse than it is now. And the whole reason is because the vehicles we make they're just far cleaner. They've got better emission equipment, things function properly. And even diesels, they used to stink so badly. You just get next to an old diesel, like a early 90s, sort of early 2000s Ford diesel pickup truck, 7.3 liter, great engine, by the way. But just the smell, you can barely breathe next to it. And you get a brand new 6.7 liter Ford, you can just have the engine's running, you can barely hear it. You can have a conversation and talk beside it. And, that's the technology, the advancements in engine design, and also the emission equipment that's put on the vehicle. So there's a tremendous advantage to it.
Of having the emission equipment.
But having it, yeah. Now, there are advantages to removing it, as we've said, but they're not really favorable in many respects.
So isn't it foolish for a shop to actually remove this equipment based on the legal requirements to have that you must have, according to the law, emission equipment on your vehicle?
Yeah, I would say so. Absolutely. We don't do it at our shop. We have, chosen not to do it. I know a lot of other progressive diesel shops that don't do it. That don't do it either. I know Bulletproof Diesel, it's a company in the US. They sell a lot of neat products for diesel vehicles to make them better. They don't sell any removal equipment either. There are companies in the US, Edge Diagnostics, used to make a tuner that would allow you to delete everything. They got sued for millions of dollars by the EPA, so they're gone and out of business. And there are shops around. I actually know a dealership not far from me. I'm not going to mention the brand name, but they actually remove emission equipment from their diesels. And I said, how do you guys, why are you guys doing that? Aren't you worried about your liability? He said, no, we just get people to sign a waiver that they're using it for off-road use, and which is ridiculous. I'm sure it'll come back to bite them at some point. You never know when the government's going to really clamp down. Like right now they don't, but they can. So yeah, I think it's foolish.
Any final thoughts on the subject of emission device removal?
Yeah, well, if you think, hey, no one's going to look for it, I'll tell you that I've had a couple of customers in the last 6 months, both driving Dodge diesels, driving down the road. Something happened. A light flickered or malfunctioned, and the police pulled them over. kind of got a little suspicious that they may have removed some emission equipment and ordered them to have an inspection done to make sure that everything was in order. So those are the kind of simple things that happen. They're not usually cops out about looking, with flashlights under a vehicle. But if anything happens, they get suspicious, and it's sometimes the little things like a burnt out light bulb that'll take you out. So, I don't know. My final thoughts, keep it there, keep it working, and keep our air clean.
Yeah, for those who want to remove it, just think about removing all that equipment, parking that vehicle in your garage, closing the door and spending an hour in there. Would you do that? Would you want your kids to do that? Would you want your grandparents to do that? They're not going to live, and neither are you if you do that. It's deadly toxic, and the more research is done, it's the minute particles that come out of a diesel are making us stupid, basically, and killing us.
The particulate from diesel is a carcinogen. It's a very fine particle, gets deep in the lungs, and it's pretty serious.
It's killing people.
Yeah, it is. So again, we're working on ways to get our world cleaner. I mean, when one day all vehicles will be electric and we won't be having this conversation anymore. But in the interim, we're doing the best we can with the dirty fuel.
So if you're looking for service for your diesel vehicle to keep it running clean and legally in Vancouver, the guys to see are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112. They're also experienced in putting diesel emission equipment back on vehicles, so you can call them and inquire about that. It's a steep price to pay. Be aware of that. And this is in the Vancouver, BC area of Canada. Thank you so much for watching the podcast. We really appreciate it. Give us a like on the socials. And thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for watching.